We have just released Strimzi 0.28, and as with the previous releases, we have for you a short video taking you through the new features and main changes. And we can start with Apache Kafka 3.1, which was released in January, and it is now supported in Strimzi 0.28. It also supports Kafka 3.0, but keep in mind that Kafka 2.8 and 2.8.1 are not supported anymore in this version. Another change is around running on FIPS-enabled Kubernetes clusters. The latest versions of OpenJDK automatically detect the enabled FIPS mode and allow applications to use only the Sun PKCS 11 security provider, and this causes the Strimzi operators and operands to fail. That's why we introduce a new FIPS mode environment variable, which can be used to configure the Strimzi cluster operator. And when you set it to disabled, Strimzi will automatically disable the FIPS mode in the OpenJDK, both in the operators as well as on all the Strimzi operands. This, of course, does not affect any other applications running in your cluster. They will still have the FIPS mode enabled. And just to make it clear, this does not make Strimzi FIPS compliant. It just makes it possible to run Strimzi on FIPS-enabled Kubernetes clusters. Let's have a look at a quick demo. I have my FIPS-enabled Kubernetes cluster here, and when I list the pods, you can see that I already deployed the Strimzi cluster operator, and you can see that it's crash looping. So let's have a look at the error. And you can see that it's complaining about some key store and some PKCS 11 exceptions. This is because right now, by default, the OpenJDK enforce the FIPS mode. And what I can do now in 0.28, I can do kubectl setenv deployment Strimzi cluster operator, and I can set now the FIPS mode environment variable to the value disabled. And when I watch the pod, you can see that the pod was recreated and it is now running. And because we disabled the FIPS mode, it should now not have the error anymore. And it should just start as in a normal cluster. And it should start deploying the Kafka cluster as well. Another new feature in this release are the StrimziPodSets. StrimziPodSets are a new internal custom resource which allows Strimzi to manage pods directly instead of using the Kubernetes stateful sets for that. And the reason we are introducing it is that it should allow us to add some interesting new functionality in the future, such as Kafka clusters stretched across multiple Kubernetes clusters, or for example, different configurations for each Kafka broker. Right now, this feature is disabled in 0.28, but you can use the feature gate use StrimziPodSets to enable it, and you can test it and let us know if it works for you or if you find any bugs, and help us to make sure that this works before one of the future Strimzi versions enables this by default. Let's have again look at a quick demo. I have already configured my cluster operator to enable the use StrimziPodSets feature gate, and I have deployed my Kafka cluster with it. Now, when I list the pods, you should see that the output is exactly the same as we are used to, without any change, which would be obvious from this. But when I list the stateful sets, you can see that no stateful sets are found in this namespace because they are not used anymore. When I instead list the StrimziPodSets, you can see that there's a StrimziPodset for the Kafka cluster and for the Zookeeper cluster. You can see how many nodes there are, whether they are ready, whether they are up to date. And you can see that right now this Kafka cluster is not using the stateful sets anymore, but it's already managing the pods directly with the Strimzi operator through the StrimziPodSets. Another new feature is custom authentication. For a long time, Strimzi supported three different authentication types: Scrum SHA-512, Mutual TLS authentication, and OAuth authentication. In 0.28, we add new authentication type called custom. You can use it to configure your own authentication mechanism. It allows you to also override the Kafka principal builder, and you can, for example, use it with your own custom authentication plugins. Keep in mind that this is an expert option, and you should use it only when you know what you are doing, because you can quite easily break your cluster. Another change which a lot of users were asking for is around the Bootstrap load balancers. When load balancer type listener is used, Strimzi so far always created one load balancer per broker, and then in addition to that, it created one additional load balancer which was used as the Bootstrap load balancer. In some environments, such as the public cloud, this might create additional costs, and not every user wants to really use the Bootstrap load balancer. So in this release, we introduce a new option which is called Create Bootstrap Service, which allows you to disable the Bootstrap load balancer to be created. By default, it works in the same way as it worked in the previous versions, and the Bootstrap load balancer is created. But if you want, you can use this option to disable it. Let's have a look at a quick demo. In this demo, my Kafka cluster is already configured with a load balancer listener. And when I go to the configuration of the listener, you can see it's type load balancer port 9094. And you can see this create bootstrap service option is set to false. What that means is that when I list my services, I have the my cluster Kafka LB0, 1, and 2 load balancer services, but it didn't create the bootstrap load balancer service because I disabled this. So I saved one load balancer in this deployment. And when I get the cluster, then instead of using the bootstrap server address in the status, you can see that it just combined all the three load balancers for the individual brokers into the bootstrap server's address. So you can just use this in your client and configure it to connect to this Kafka cluster this way. Another change is related to the cruise control integration. If you use JBot storage in your brokers with multiple disks per broker, you can now use the Kafka rebalance custom resource to do intra-broker balancing. That means that cruise control can be now used to balance the data between the different disks on the same broker. There are also some changes around identity replication policy. From Kafka 3.0, Kafka has its own identity replication policy. The Strimzi identity replication policy has the same functionality as the Kafka policy, and it doesn't make much sense to maintain it in parallel. It is still available, but it is now deprecated, and it will be removed in the future. So after upgrading to 0.28, you should migrate your Mirror Maker 2 to use the Kafka policy directly. There are also all kinds of different dependency updates in this release. The authorization plugin for Open Policy Agent was updated to the version 1.4. There were also updates to the Kafka bridge, to the OAuth library, or, for example, to cruise control. These were the main new features and changes in this release. Thanks to everyone who contributed to it. If you like this video and want us to continue doing it for every release, please make sure to give it a thumbs up or leave some comments.